There are moments in life when silence is the only armor you have. When speaking up feels like a risk you can't afford and all you can do is hold your head up, keep walking, and pray no one sees the way your hands tremble. For Leona Briggs, it wasn't the mud that stained her clothes that morning, it was the way no one stopped. Not the woman behind the wheel, not the supervisor who barked at her, not even the coworkers who looked away. She had learned, long ago, how to disappear without leaving the room. But what if someone was watching not to judge, not to punish, but to truly see her? To recognize not the uniform she wore, but the strength she carried quietly, every single day. This is a story about quiet dignity, about rising through the kind of grace that doesn't shout, and about the moment the world finally looked back and remembered her name. Now, let's get started. The morning sky over Baltimore was the color of worn concrete. Not quite gray, not quite blue, just heavy. It matched the air, which felt cold enough to cut through fabric and still, like it was waiting to witness something. Leona Briggs stepped off bus route 36 near the inner harbor. Her shoulders hunched beneath a faded maroon jacket. Her sneakers were thin-soled and damp from yesterday's storm, but she kept moving, head down, arms wrapped around a plastic tote containing her work gloves, a bottled water, and a peanut butter sandwich wrapped in wax paper. She didn't complain. Leona had stopped expecting comfort a long time ago. At 27, her life revolved around survival. 3 cleaning jobs, a diabetic mother whose meds kept getting more expensive, and a younger brother chasing his GED while the streets tried to claim him. Mornings weren't about dreams. They were about not being late. Ashworth Hall came into view. A grand stone building with Greco-Roman pillars and glass walkway shows to fundraisers, policy summits, and champagne galas for people who'd never ridden a city bus in their lives. Leona wasn't allowed through the front doors. She entered through the side, always the side. As she neared the staff entrance, she stepped carefully around a puddle that had collected in a dip in the curb. But she didn't move fast enough. A white Range Rover rounded the corner with speed. Tires sliced through the puddle with surgical precision, sending a wall of filthy water into the air. It slammed against Leona's side like a cold slap from the world itself. Her jacket, pants, beige everything soaked in brown, oily runoff. Her sandwich was ruined. Her gloves, soaked. Her breath caught, but no sound escaped. The car didn't stop. Instead, the tinted passenger window slid down smoothly. A voice floated out, airy and amused. "Oh, honey, wrong sidewalk," said the woman inside, her words laced with casual venom. Her red lipstick didn't move much. She laughed. Phone still held high streaming, no doubt. Leona stood frozen. She didn't shout, didn't curse, didn't break down. She just blinked, lowered her eyes, and stepped back onto the sidewalk. Behind her, the Range Rover sped off, exhaust fumes curling like smoke from a burned bridge. But not everyone moved on. From the third-floor terrace of Ashworth Hall, a man stood with his coffee untouched, watching the scene unfold with quiet intensity. His name was Derek Caldwell. At 38, he had the calm demeanor of someone who had seen too much and chosen silence over spectacle. Co-founder of a national investment group and founder of an education equity nonprofit, Derek didn't often attend events at Ashworth, despite being one of its primary donors. He preferred to work behind the curtain. But today, he had shown up early, something told him to. And now, as he watched Leona wipe the dirty water from her face with the sleeve of her jacket, something settled in his chest like a weight that refused to move. He recognized the driver, Whitney Lennox, influencer, daughter of Senator Lennox, and a habitual occupant of front-row galas and viral moments. Derek had funded causes Whitney pretended to support, but now all he could see was her laughter, the cruel, careless kind he thought he'd left behind when he got out of West Baltimore. He took out his phone. "Get me the name of the cleaning crew supervisor," he said quietly to his assistant. "And the schedule. I want to know who that woman is." Downstairs, Leona had already entered through the side hallway reserved for staff. It smelled like bleach and disappointment. She moved quickly toward the locker room, avoiding eye contact with anyone. Her badge had beeped red twice before scanning green, almost like the building itself was reluctant to let her in. 6 minutes late, Briggs, barked Mr. Holloway, the operations supervisor, without looking up from his clipboard. And what the hell happened to you? I got splashed. Outside, she said, her voice soft, like she was apologizing for existing. This is a 5-star venue, he snapped. You can't show up looking like a sewer exploded on you. Two'll clean up. You'll work double tonight. Maybe next time you think twice before swimming to work. He didn't wait for a reply. He never did. Leona nodded, eyes low, and walked toward the cleaning supply room. Her soaked shoes squished with every step. None of the other staff spoke to her. A few gave sideways glances. One woman, older, shook her head and turned away. No one asked if she was okay. By the time she changed into her backup uniforma, faded blue polo 2 sizes too by her hands were trembling. She tied her hair up, ignored the wet strands clinging to her temple, and got to work. In the grand ballroom, the morning crew had already rolled up most of the linen from last night's fundraiser. Empty champagne flutes clinked in bus bins. The room smelled of citrus cleaner and old money. Leona knelt beside the buffet table, scrubbing at a wine stain that had sunk into the grout. Her knees ached on the marble floor. She whispered to herself under her breath, "Just get through today." No one saw her pain. No one heard her whisper, but someone was watching. Back on the 3rd floor, Derek stood with his assistant, now holding a file. "Her name is Leona Briggs," she said. 27. Lives in Cherry Hill. Employed here part-time. 2 dependents listed. Mother and younger brother. Been with the company for 3 years. No HR complaints. Nothing notable. Derek looked at the printed photo of her ID badge. Her face was caught mid-blink, but even in that moment he saw something. Resilience. Not pride. Not defiance. Just someone who refused to fall apart. He tapped the photo lightly. "She didn't deserve that," he said. His assistant raised an eyebrow. "You want me to do something?" Derek stared out the window again, but the street was empty now. "Yes," he replied, "but not yet." Leona's shift dragged like wet laundry in the wind. Every scrape of a mop across the ballroom floor echoed in her bones. Her backup uniform clung uncomfortably to her skin, damp in the wrong places, itchy in the others. But none of that mattered. What mattered was surviving the day without drawing attention. Ashworth Hall didn't tolerate mess, not in its events, not in its image, and certainly not among its employees. The elite who walked through its revolving glass doors didn't see the cleaning crew, not really. They saw polished wood, crisp linen, champagne pyramids. People like Leona were the invisible scaffolding holding that illusion together. But today, she felt more seen than ever in the worst possible way. The lunch break came too late. She took her 10-minute break in the staff corridor behind the kitchens. There were no chairs, so she sat on an overturned plastic crate, her knees tucked close. She pulled out her sandwich, what was left of it half smashed in the morning chaos. The peanut butter had soaked through the wax paper, and the bread was limp. She ate it anyway, slowly, eyes down. Between bites, she checked her phone. 2 missed texts from her brother. "Ma's out of insulin," and "Don't tell her I told you. She said not to worry you." Leona exhaled, long and low. The insulin coverage had been cut last month. She'd appealed the denial twice. No answer. The peanut butter caught in her throat, but she swallowed it down. She closed her eyes for a second and let the silence settle in. No one sat beside her. No one asked how her morning went. No one offered a kind word. Maybe they were afraid to be associated with her. Maybe they thought it was safer to say nothing. In places like Ashworth, silence was survival. She got up before the break ended and headed back to the ballroom. That evening, as the event guests filtered in through the main rotunda, Leona was stationed near the floral installation's fluffing centerpieces, adjusting table runners, making sure the place looked like no one had ever stepped inside it. But each arrangement she touched left her fingers raw. The acidic mix of cleaning chemicals from earlier had started peeling her skin, again old eczema flaring up under stress. She clenched her jaw and kept going. The doormen welcomed politicians, donors, and executives with gloved hands and choreographed charm. A few of them had names she recognized from television. None of them looked at her. Somewhere above the chandeliers, in the mezzanine lounge, Derek Caldwell was present but unseen. Not in a flashy way. He wore a charcoal sport coat, no tie, collar slightly open. Just another donor blending in. But his eyes didn't scan the crowd. They followed Leona. He didn't know why he couldn't look away. Maybe it was her posture upright despite everything. Maybe it was the way she offered a folded napkin to a guest who'd spilled his wine. Her hands steady, her face still. There was something sacred in her silence. He hadn't said a word to her. Not yet. But he kept watching. That night, after the last guest left and the gold chairs were stacked in rows, Leona scrubbed at a dried smear of frosting on the back wall. No one would ever see it, but she did, and that was enough. She clocked out just after midnight, her legs sore and arms weak. She stepped back out onto the same sidewalk where the mud had hit her. The puddle was gone now, just a dark stain of memory on the cement. As she waited for the last bus home, she pulled her hoodie tighter and looked up at the hotel's grand facade. The building sparkled. You'd never guess someone had bled for its shine. That night, her mother was asleep on the couch when Leona walked in. The apartment smelled faintly of vapor rub and boiled greens. Her brother Miles sat on the kitchen floor with textbooks open and earbuds in. "You good?" he asked without looking up. She nodded, too tired to explain what she wasn't. 2 days passed. On the third morning, Leona arrived for her shift early. She always did. She liked the quiet before the suits arrived. But something was different. Inside her locker was a paper bag. No name on the outside. Curious, she opened it slowly. Inside, a pair of brand new work gloves, thicker, padded. A foil-wrapped breakfast sandwich, still warm, and a folded note. For the woman who holds this building together when no one's looking. She stared at the words like they might dissolve. No one else in the break room said anything. She looked around, half expecting to catch someone smirking, but everyone seemed indifferent. One man coughed. Another popped gum. She sat down and opened the sandwich. Bacon, egg, cheese, still steaming. She hadn't had a hot breakfast in over 3 weeks. She didn't cry, but her throat ached, like she might. That same morning, Derek reviewed security footage from the ballroom ostensibly for event review, but he fast-forwarded past the guests. He paused only when the camera showed Leona cleaning near the main stage. He watched her reposition a crooked banner with precision. No one saw her. She wasn't performing. She was just doing the work right. He pressed pause, then picked up his phone. "Shift her to the executive floor team," he told the regional facilities director. "No announcement. Just move her. Effective tomorrow." The voice on the other end hesitated. "Sir, she's a part-time crew member." Derek's tone didn't change. Not anymore. The next day, when Leona's name was called during the staff roll call, she tensed. Mr. Holloway rarely said names out loud, unless someone was in trouble. "You're on floor 7 now," he barked. "VIP event staff, hotel execs, private events. Don't screw it up." Leona blinked. "I didn't apply for that." "You didn't need to." And that was that. She packed her mop, her bucket, and her doubt, and headed upstairs. On the way to the elevator, she passed the staff break room. The whispers had already started. VIP floor? Her? Must have gotten cozy with someone high up. She ain't even been here that long. Leona heard them, every word, but she didn't stop walking. She didn't know who had moved her, or why, but for the first time in what felt like forever, The silence around her didn't feel suffocating. It felt like a door opening. Later that night, when she called her mom to check in, her mother's voice was thick with sleep but warm. "Everything okay, baby?" Leona hesitated. "Yeah, Ma. I think something good might be happening." Her mother chuckled. "You sound scared." "I am." Her mother's voice softened. "That's how you know it's real." That night, Leona slept with her shoes lined neatly at the foot of her bed. Her brother looked up from his phone and asked, "Why are you smiling?" She didn't answer right away, but as she turned off the lamp, she whispered, "Just trying to remember this moment." Because deep down, she knew the silence was shifting, and for once, it might be shifting in her favor. The executive floor of Ashworth Hall felt like a different country. The air was cooler, the lights dimmer, the silence heavier. Leona stood at the edge of the marbled hallway, mop in hand, glancing at her own reflection in the polished elevator doors. There were no noisy radios here, no foot traffic, no shouted commands, only muted conversations behind frosted glass conference rooms and the occasional tap of heels on imported tile. She was still Leona Briggs, janitorial staff, but this place made her feel like an intruder. Her assignment that morning was the Sky Loungia high-end relaxation suite on the penthouse level reserved for elite donors and city officials. She'd only ever seen it once, and only because a broken vacuum had taken her to the wrong floor. This time, she walked in through the front with a badge that granted her access. The room smelled of eucalyptus and mahogany. A wall-length window overlooked the harbor. Plush chairs, crystal decanters, quiet luxury everywhere. She started with the plants dusting their broad, waxy leaves when she heard a voice behind her. "Excuse me?" She turned, startled. A man stood near the espresso bar, wearing jeans and a navy pullover, his face mostly hidden beneath a baseball cap and sunglasses. "I'm looking for the Sky Lounge," he said, as if he hadn't already arrived. Leona nodded politely. "You're in it, sir. Would you like me to show you around?" He chuckled. "Maybe just point me to where I can sit without breaking protocol." She smiled faintly. "That would be any chair but the one under the skylight. That one's reserved for someone important, or so they say." He walked toward a side table and sat. "And you? How long have you worked here?" "Almost 3 years," she replied. He looked at her differently then. "Do you enjoy it?" Leona hesitated, tightening her grip on the cloth in her hand. "I don't know if anyone dreams of mopping floors, but I'm thankful. I try to do my best." The man studied her quietly. Then he said, in a voice that surprised even her, "You do more than that. You shine." She blinked. "Thanks, I think." He didn't press further, just nodded, and sipped from the cup he'd made himself. When she turned to finish her task, she noticed the back of her hand was shaking slightly. She didn't know why. It was only later, in the staff elevator, that she realized she never asked for his name, and he never offered it. That evening, Derek stood on the rooftop of Ashworth Hall, looking out at the water. He was alone, but not lonely. The city lights flickered in reflection below him, and the conversation with Leona still echoed in his ears. She didn't know who he was, and that was the point. He admired her grace, her restraint, her unwillingness to perform for favor. She didn't ask for sympathy. She just stood upright and did the job most people refused to see. He made a call. "Begin the paperwork," he told his assistant. "Scholarship, hospitality management, paid in full. Find a program that lets her work part-time while she studies." "Under what name?" "Anonymous donor," he said, then paused. "For now." Leona was called into the supervisor's office the next afternoon. Mr. Holloway wasn't alone this time. The regional manager, Mr. Hurst, sat beside him, arms crossed. She braced herself. "There was an incident," Holloway said, his tone tight. "Slippery flooring in the north lobby." A guest slipped. Her stomach dropped. "Sir, I wasn't on that floor." Your cleaning badge logged chemicals from your cart. That can't be right. We reviewed the report, Hurst added. It's a serious infraction. I didn't do anything wrong, she whispered. No one responded, just stared, until someone knocked on the door. A hotel security officer entered with a USB in hand. We checked the camera footage, he said, looking directly at Hurst. You're going to want to see this. Later, after everything settled. After it was proven that a coworker, Tanya, with 6 years of service had tampered with Leona's cart. The apology came, but it was rushed, awkward, and unsigned. You're cleared, was all Holloway said. Leona stood in the hallway outside the office, breathing hard, arms tight around her chest. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. But inside, something cracked and something else took its place. She wasn't invisible anymore. Not to everyone. That night, she arrived home to the scent of lemon cleaner and fresh towels. Her brother had cleaned the apartment. Her mother was smiling tired, but proud. You ever think maybe you deserve good things? Her mom asked gently. Leona looked at her hands. I think I'm afraid to believe that. 2 days later, another envelope appeared in her locker. No name, no seal. Inside, a full scholarship offer, hospitality management certificate, evening classes, part-time schedule accommodated. Leona stared at it for a full minute. She looked around the locker room. No one was paying her any attention. But she felt it. Someone had opened a door she didn't even know existed. The next morning, she returned to the executive floor. Same room, same polish, same scent of wood and mint. Derek was there again, dressed differently this time in a white dress shirt and slacks. No sunglasses, no hat, just him. You again, she said, half smiling. He chuckled. You really like this place. I like seeing things grow, he replied, eyes on her. She tilted her head. You're not just a guest, are you? He extended his hand. Derek Caldwell. She froze. You're the Derek Caldwell? He smiled gently. I'm just Derek, and I've been watching. Her breath caught. I saw what happened outside, he continued. The car, the mud, and how you kept walking. Her smile faded. You didn't deserve that, he said softly, and I couldn't forget it. She opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. You don't have to say anything, he added. Just know I see you. That night, Leona stood on her apartment balcony, the city buzzing below. Her hands still trembled slightly from the shock of the day. She had been truly seen for the first time in years. And it wasn't out of pity. It was something else. Something like belief. She closed her eyes. Maybe this was what hope felt like. Not loud, but quiet and strong and rising. The days that followed were quiet, but not the same kind of quiet Leona Briggs had known before. This one didn't come from invisibility. It came from clarity. She didn't boast. She didn't tell anyone what Derek had said to her. She didn't flash the scholarship offer or seek validation. Instead, she folded the letter gently, tucked it into her pocket, and went back to work. But everything had shifted. Her hands moved the same precise, efficient, but her posture was different. She stood straighter. Her eyes didn't drop when passing guests or executives anymore. She met their gaze, not challengingly, but firmly, like someone who knew who she was. She still cleaned, still mopped the edges of marble floors and restocked the linen carts, but the way she moved through the hallways changed. The way others looked at her changed too. Some smiled, some stepped aside, and others watched in silence. There were whispers now, half curious, half resentful. Some staff whispered she was dating someone upstairs. Others speculated about favors, secrets, shortcuts. Tanya, the one who'd tried to sabotage her, returned from her suspension with narrowed eyes and cold shoulders. She got lucky, Tanya muttered one morning near the staff lockers. Luck don't last forever. Leona heard it and didn't respond, because she'd already learned something Tanya hadn't. Silence, when anchored in truth, was its own kind of power. At night, Leona started attending hospitality classes downtown. 3 nights a week. She sat in the front row, took notes like her life depended on it, because in some ways, it did. She worked her shift, grabbed dinner from the 7-Eleven across the street, then hustled to class with her notebook wedged between her lunch container and bus fare. One night after class, her instructor pulled her aside. Leona, your suggestions during yesterday's group project, the guest flow strategy? I passed them to a colleague who manages a boutique hotel in D.C. He said they're already using it. She blinked, unsure if she'd heard right. You've got a mind for this, he added. Not just hands, a mind. She walked home that night in silence, tears lining her lashes. No one had said that to her. In years, maybe. Ever. Back at Ashworth, things continued to unfold quietly. Derek visited more often, but never publicly. He didn't parade through lobbies or demand recognition. Sometimes he sat in the cafe reading. Other times, he'd pretend to check his phone in the elevator, catching a glimpse of her as she passed. But he never approached unless she was off duty. Always with respect. Always with space. Leona appreciated that. She didn't want rescue. She wanted room to rise. One afternoon, she was polishing the reception desk when the assistant general manager approached her. Miss Briggs, do you have a moment? She tensed. Of course. He handed her a folder. Inside were notes from guest reviews, handwritten compliments about her service, her attention to detail, her grace. You're the most mentioned staff member on our VIP floor, he said. I think it's time we give you some input on how it runs. She blinked. Me? He smiled. Who better? From that day forward, once a week, she sat in a backroom meeting, usually reserved for mid-level managers. She didn't say much at first, but when she did, people listened. They didn't know her story, only her presence. And that was enough. Not everyone celebrated. Whitney Lennox, watching from the comfort of her luxury condo, noticed the shift. Her PR team flagged a photo making rounds online, grainy, but clear. Her SUV splashing mud near Ashworth Hall. The caption read, "Some people build platforms, others just drive over them." No names, no tagging, but the comments were brutal and accurate. Whitney's hands trembled as she tossed her phone aside. This again? She snapped at her assistant. She's just a cleaner. Why won't this go away? Her assistant didn't answer, because they all knew it wasn't going away. Not because of scandal, but because of grace. Because the girl she'd laughed at wasn't vanishing. She was rising. Leona kept to herself. She declined a few press inquiries that came through Derek's foundation. She wasn't interested in headlines. She wanted space to grow without spectacle. But the transformation couldn't be hidden forever. One Friday afternoon, she walked into the staff lounge to find a small vase of daisies sitting on the table. No note this time, just flowers. She looked around, confused, then smiled quietly. It didn't matter who sent them. What mattered was this. Someone saw her effort and responded with softness. That evening, Derek waited for her by the cafe. She walked in during her break, hair pulled back, notebook in hand. He stood, holding a takeout container. You missed dinner again, he said. She smiled. Didn't know you were keeping track. I noticed things. She sat down, opened the container chicken stir-fry, her favorite, and took a bite without saying a word. He didn't press, but after a pause he asked, Do you know how far you've come? She shrugged. I don't feel like I've arrived anywhere. I'm just moving forward. Derek nodded. That's what arriving actually looks like. They sat together in comfortable silence, surrounded by distant voices, the clatter of dishes, the hum of the city. For the first time, Leona didn't feel like she was waiting for permission to breathe. She was already breathing, fully, and on her own terms. That weekend, she spent a few hours with her brother at the public library. He was studying for his GED exam, and she helped quiz him. Afterward, as they walked down Utah Street sharing a bag of fries, he nudged her. "You're different," he said. She raised a brow. "I mean it. You used to just hold everything in. Now, I don't know. You glow weird." She laughed. "Thanks, I guess?" "I mean like. You're the same, just louder without saying anything." She stopped walking for a second and looked at him. Maybe that was it. Not revenge. Not noise. Just presence. A dignity that didn't need to prove itself. On Monday morning, the hotel launched a pilot initiative to redesign staff uniforms, and they asked Leona for feedback on functionality and comfort. She recommended moisture-wicking fabric, better soles for standing long hours, and name tags that used Miss or Mr. instead of first names so staff wouldn't be casually stripped of respect. 2 weeks later, those suggestions were adopted, not credited to her, but implemented. And that was enough. One evening, after another successful VIP conference, Leona stepped out onto the rooftop terrace of Ashworth Hall. She stood alone, looking out at the skyline she used to think was closed off to her. Derek walked up beside her, no fanfare, just quiet. "Funny thing about ceilings," he said. She glanced at him. "They look like limits," he continued. "But really, they're just floors you haven't reached yet." Leona smiled faintly. "You have a quote for everything, don't you?" "Only when I'm standing next to someone worth quoting." She didn't respond right away. Then, quietly, "I used to think dignity was something people gave you, but maybe it's what you refuse to let them take." He looked at her, eyes soft. "Exactly." They stood there until the sky shifted from dusk to deep blue, and for once, neither of them felt the need to say goodbye. Because what they had wasn't fleeting, it was growing, steady, and real. Ashworth Hall turned 100 that year. To celebrate the centennial, the board planned a formal gala black tie, string quartet, catered by the best chefs on the East Coast. It was the kind of event where most of the guests arrived in cars longer than the block they parked on, where toasts were made not just to success but to lineage. Leona stood near the entrance that evening in a navy blue gown, simple, sleeveless, and borrowed from a friend who insisted it would look better on her. She wore no jewelry besides a small silver pin on her shoulder, shaped like a feather. She hadn't planned to attend. She assumed she wouldn't be invited. But the invitation had arrived, hand-delivered, embossed, with her full name, Ms. Leona Briggs, guest of honor. For a moment, when she read it, she thought it was a mistake, but it wasn't. And now, she stood in the grand foyer of the very building where she'd once been warned not to scuff the floor with her mop bucket. The guests took notice as she entered. They didn't whisper. They looked, and they moved slightly respectfully to let her through. Derek stood near the bar in a tailored charcoal suit, hands in his pockets, eyes already waiting for her. When he saw her, he smiled like he'd known this was coming all along. They didn't kiss, didn't hold hands. But something passed between them in that glance, something old and quiet, and stronger than ceremony. The hotel director stepped up to the microphone, tapping the glass gently. "Tonight, we honor not just a century of history, but the people who shaped its most recent chapter. Please welcome Miss Leona Briggs." The room quieted. People turned. Some even rose to their feet. Leona approached the podium slowly. Her heels tapped softly against the marble, but her voice, when she spoke, didn't tremble. "A little over a year ago," she began, "I walked into this building with wet shoes and a bag full of rags. I entered through a side door, hoping no one would notice me, and most of the time no one did." Her eyes scanned the room, not for guilt but for truth. "I was just the cleaner. That was my job title. But it was also the box I lived in. A box that said, 'You belong in the background.'" She paused. "But something changed. Not because I shouted, or demanded, or fought, but because someone saw me not for what I did, but for how I did it. The room held its breath, and from that moment on I made a choice. To keep showing up, to keep rising, even when it was quiet, especially when it was quiet. She looked toward the hotel director, who stood smiling, then to Derek, whose eyes never left her. I'm honored truly to stand here, but this plaque behind me isn't just for me. She gestured to the wall, where a new bronze engraving had been revealed. The Briggs Room, in honor of the invisible hands that build the brightest legacies. Applause rose slowly at first, then thundered through the ballroom. Later that night, Leona stood outside alone, looking up at the facade of Ashworth Hall. The night air was crisp. Lights twinkled along the harbor. Derek joined her quietly, holding 2 paper cups of cocoa. Thought you might need something warm, he said. She took the cup and smiled. I still don't know why you picked me. He looked at her for a long time, then said, because in a world full of noise, your silence told the truth. They sipped in silence. Then she whispered, do you ever think about how it started? The mud? He asked. She nodded. That wasn't just a splash, he said. It was a reveal. They stood for a moment, remembering. Then she stepped out of her heels and walked barefoot across the marble path. What are you doing? Derek laughed. Leaving the last trace of who I used to be, she replied, still walking, and stepping fully into who I am now. Without hesitation, Derek removed his shoes too, and walked beside her. Not in front, not behind, beside. Equal. Proud. A few weeks later, local news picked up the story. A small blog titled it, From Mops to Management, The Quiet Rise of Leona Briggs. Soon, larger outlets followed. But Leona never agreed to interviews. Instead, she focused on finishing her certification. She kept working part-time by choice and eventually took a coordinator role for guest experience. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't loud. But it was hers. She started mentoring new hires, speaking at small staff orientation events, quiet things, real things. And every time someone thanked her, she just smiled and said, I'm just doing what someone once did for me. Meanwhile, Whitney Lennox's world dimmed. Her brand contracts dried up after a series of tone-deaf posts went viral. Her father pulled political support quietly. She blamed algorithms, the media, even Leona. But what she never understood was that the world didn't turn against her. It just stopped turning around her. On the first day of spring, Ashworth Hall opened a new program, free hospitality workshops for community members from under-resourced neighborhoods. It was Leona's idea. She would lead the first session. The room was modest. 15 folding chairs, a whiteboard, and a stack of donated notebooks. But it bore her name, and her presence, and her purpose. That evening, after everyone left, she stood in the center of the room barefoot again, just for a second, and whispered, thank you. Not to anyone in particular, just to the journey. Some stories are written in headlines. Others are written in silence. Leona's was both. It began in mud. It ended in legacy. And somewhere in between, it bloomed so brightly that even the walls learned her name. Sometimes, we think rising means being loud, taking space, making noise. But Leona reminded us that rising can be quiet, steady, and filled with grace. Her story isn't just about what she overcame, it's about what she carried with dignity, long before the world ever noticed. If you've ever felt invisible, overlooked, or like the door wasn't made for you, let this remind you, your presence matters, and your story told or untold has power. We hope her journey inspired you as much as it moved us. If it did, go ahead and subscribe for more stories like this. And if there's a moment that resonated with you, share it in the comments. We'd love to hear what stayed with you. Because sometimes, all it takes is one quiet choice to change everything. She never asked for the room, but she earned the light it gave. We'll see you in the next story. Stay tuned.